All right, guys, what you're about to see is a little teaser clip from Crystal Kyle and Friends. If you like the show, if you support us, you can go over to Substack, pay $5 a month. You get a video of the interview and you get it a day early. Everybody else can sign up for free at Substack and they get the full audio podcast available a day later, usually on Saturdays. We had a phenomenal conversation with a great YouTuber called Lonerbox, and we got into free speech, deplatforming, and all sorts of amazing issues. So if you enjoy this, please consider supporting the show. Love y'all.
So we had a little breaking news happen today that I wanted to get your reaction to, Kyle. So you remember the fatal shooting on the set of that film, Rust, where somehow Alec Baldwin ends up with a loaded gun in his hand, live ammunition, when it should have been, a prop gun with no ammo in it whatsoever, and ends up accidentally killing this woman on the set. And there were a lot of how the hell did this happen? Like, this never should have been a real gun. There never should have been live ammo, all this stuff. Well, now it just came out today. He is actually going to be charged with involuntary manslaughter in that fatal shooting. The film's armorer, which is the person who is charged with dealing with the guns on the set and making sure that everything is safe, will also be charged. The assistant director has agreed to plead guilty to negligent use of a deadly weapon.
Wait, is that the same charge, involuntary manslaughter, for the person who handles the gear too?
Correct.
Same for him and Alec Baldwin, you're saying?
Correct. Okay. So the film's armorer overseeing weapons, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, will also be charged with involuntary manslaughter, according to a statement from the Santa Fe area district attorney. Those charges expect to be filed by the end of the month. And then there was the guilty plea on the charge of negligent use of a deadly weapon. Just some of the details here. Alec Baldwin's attorney, of course, says Mr. Baldwin had no reason to believe there was a live bullet in the gun or anywhere on the film set. He relied on the professionals with whom he worked who assured him the gun did not have live rounds. We will fight these charges and we will win. Baldwin has claimed that he never pulled the trigger, that it was like a gun malfunction.
I think people kind of prove that that's
not possible.
Totally bogus.
So that seems bogus. I mean, whether or not he remembers pulling the trigger, he certainly pulled the trigger. I also thought this was an interesting comment from the special prosecutor who was assigned to the case. She said, if any one of these three people, Alec Baldwin, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, or David Halls, had done their job, Helena Hutchins, that's the woman who was killed, would be alive today. And procedurally, what will happen is once the charges are filed, prosecutors will then present their case before a judge, and then they'll rule whether there's probable cause to move forward with an actual trial. So that's
what do you think of this? I want to know what your take before I get into mine, because there's a really interesting philosophical question at the heart of this.
Well, given what we know about it, I think it's probably an appropriate charge because you have a responsibility on that set, both as the armorer, as the director, as the actor, to check and make sure that it's safe, that it's not a real gun, that there isn't a live bullet in the chamber. And so, I especially given there are a lot of questions about before any of this happened, there were crew members who were quitting the production over safety concerns, over, all kinds of working condition concerns. So there was a lot that was going on exterior to this. And then you have this armor who was sort of relatively new and green, and protocols which were apparently not being followed on the set. When you have someone like Alec Baldwin, who's obviously very seasoned actor, there were clearly failures who occurred here and resulted in this woman's life being lost.
So I'll give you my take. Some of this is probably controversial, although I don't know. But I blame more the person whose job it was to make sure the gun was safe. Mm-hmm. I think they are way more culpable than Alec Baldwin. And by the way, I hate Alec Baldwin. He annoys me, and I can't really put it on why. I think he's got a really high opinion of himself, and I don't think he's all that special. He's kind of annoying, if anything. So I don't like him, but I definitely blame the other person more. Do you agree with that?
I do. Let me read to you what they say, the affidavits from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, the sort of sequence of events. Mr. Halls, that's the producer who pled guilty to negligent handling of a weapon, took one of 3 prop guns laid down on a rolling cart, handed it to Mr. Baldwin to film the scene. Mr. Halls yelled, "Cold gun," indicating the firearm did not have live rounds. Mr. Baldwin took the gun and fired it, one of the affidavits said. Investigators have also questioned the armorer, Ms. Gutierrez-Reed's actions as the person in charge of guns and ammunition on set. So the producer picks it up, says cold gun, hands it to Alec Baldwin.
So he might even be somewhat responsible. But again, I still put it more on the person whose job it was. Yeah.
Well, because the question still remains. This is the part that we still really haven't gotten to the bottom of. How the hell did this gun get on the set to start with? I mean, this should never have been there. Bullets, like this live rounds, should never.
Of course, yeah. I mean, that goes without saying. Yeah, so you're saying
like,
it maybe was on purpose?
I'm not saying maybe it's on purpose. I genuinely don't know.
You're just confused.
How the hell did it happen?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if in Hollywood sometimes they use real guns as prop guns. That it's not just like a fake gun is like literally fake. You know what I'm saying? Like you get a real gun, you put a blank round in it.
To have live rounds on set, like that never should have happened.
Well, yeah, it did though. You know? So
do you support charges against Baldwin at all? Because the protocol apparently, I'm from digging back and when we covered this extensively, like he also did not follow protocol. Every person in the chain is supposed to check that gun before you do anything.
But again, from his perspective, he has zero reason to believe that this gun is loaded and that it's a real gun and that it's going to kill somebody. So again, I blame the person whose job it was to check the thing before a hell of a lot more than I blame him. So it's a very, very difficult question for this simple reason. Do you evaluate a crime based on the harm done to the victim, or do you evaluate it based on the intent, or do you have some mix of the two?
Because, well, I don't think, I mean, the fact that it was involuntary manslaughter means there was no intent.
I understand that, but then I guess what I'm asking is, I guess I'm questioning what the punishment really should be for something like involuntary manslaughter, because from my perspective, if you can really prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the person did not have malintent, they weren't trying to commit a crime, and also they didn't act like with reckless abandon.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, I can see the perspective, like, why don't punish them at all? Because if anything, you're taking a situation where there's a victim and you're just creating a new victim because there's something that's unjust about taking somebody who didn't have malintent, didn't want to do anything wrong, acted in a normal way, and some freak occurrence happens, and as a result of that, there's a dead body. Like, you're trying to pin it on somebody where there is no there. So part of me believes, like, this, like, the way we evaluate crimes is psycho. Now, I understand, though, the reason why it's hard to codify what I just described into law is because you can get situations where people fudge the facts or fudge the narrative, where it's a case where the person did want to kill them, but they make it look like, no, total mistake, bro. And then it's like, there's no punishment at all. And then that's a problem, right? Or
someone, I mean, a classic example, like a drunk driver, right? Where you're acting.
Yeah, but see, that's different than what I was describing.
But I'm just giving the example of like, you're already committing a low-level crime by driving drunk, right? But you're acting with such negligence that, no, did you want to kill the person? But you did because of your actions.
See, that's different.
That's the idea. Involuntary manslaughter, the definition I have here is a killing that results either from recklessness or criminal negligence or from the commission of a low-level criminal act, such as a misdemeanor.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't know if Alec Baldwin meets that line.
You don't think it rises to the level of recklessness?
It's not his job to check the gun. He's just doing his job.
It was his job to check the gun, though.
Somebody's job is literally to just check the gun, and then it gets to him, and he's going to think, like, I'm just doing my job here.
But the argument is
everybody needs to check it?
Every person in the chain, it is their job to check the gun.
Like, okay, does he even know that? Because if I'm an actor and somebody hands me a gun, and they're like, cold gun, and it already went through 2 different people before it got to me, and I pull the trigger and I kill somebody, I'm immediately being like, are you kidding me?
Right.
I'm responsible for this?
Apparently they supposed to go through like rigorous protocol training to, of exactly how this is all supposed to go, with an understanding that, every person in the chain is supposed to do those checks. Now, I have no idea and no insight into Hollywood culture to know how closely that is typically followed, because that would be the other question is like, okay, if they really are very consistent about this and he just sort of like recklessly blew it off, when normally people really are sticklers for every single person in the chain checks that the gun is safe and it's a cold gun. Versus like if the general being, as we just sort of assume, and we've assumed the armor has got it, like those sorts of details I think would matter in terms of the charge. But yeah, I could see if this is genuinely like, this is your job, part of your job is to double check the gun. Every person in the chain is responsible for making sure this is safe, and this happens. Like, he has some culpability.
Here's why I struggle with that. There is somebody's actual job on that set who they are supposed to handle the props and get them ready. And so that's their whole freaking job description. So then you have Alec Baldwin. His main job is acting.
So you would support involuntary manslaughter charges for the armorer, but not for Alec Baldwin.
I don't know what I support. I mean, yes, I think there's definitely culpability among the armorer. I think potentially the guy who screamed out cold gun, because, I mean, at that point, that is kind of negligent because you're actually saying it's the opposite of what it is.
When you didn't
clearly
check.
You didn't check and then you lie about it. So for those two, definitely for the armorer. For the other guy, probably too, even though I think it's slightly different. But yes, for that guy too, probably. Alec Baldwin, I just don't know. But this isn't really about Alec Baldwin, I guess, is my point. Because I've always been fascinated by this question around manslaughter. Because again, it's like, you gave the example of like the drunk driving thing, right? And on that one, I totally agree. That should be illegal. You should get locked up for that for some amount of time because there is something that you did, which I actually think is like, you assume a certain amount of risk if you're getting into a car and you're super intoxicated and you know one of the consequences of that could be, there could be some sort of accident, you could fuck up and you could kill somebody, right? And so in that instance, I see it, I'm like, I get it. That to me sounds like involuntary manslaughter.
Right.
But with the Alec Baldwin case, I'm just struggling. I'm struggling for the simple reason, if I'm trying to put myself in his shoes, right? Would I have checked that gun? I don't know if I would have.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking I'm an actor. There's never a loaded gun on a set of a movie. Like, what are we talking about? It's more likely for water to come out of this thing than it is for a bullet to come out of this thing. And so I could easily see myself in his shoes, and then that happens, then the whole world thinks I'm the bad guy and I did something wrong. And it's like, well, hold on here. So I could understand him feeling, to some extent, even though he's a massive prick, him feeling like I'm kind of being victimized right now. Because, like, there was no malintent whatsoever at all in any way, shape, or form. And so I struggle with that because, to me, a big thing about laws and justice is intent. That's a big part of it to me.
Yeah.
It may be one of the biggest parts of it. And,
yeah. Well,
and so I don't know what the punishment should be when it's not only involuntary manslaughter, but it's like, this dude really did not know in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not even sure I buy that, like, he actually was supposed to do X, Y, and Z.
I think it's pretty clear that he was. You know, if you're following the protocol by the book, he was supposed to check. There's also a piece here that creates more question marks in my mind about the fact that, you know, he's saying he didn't pull the trigger.
That is bullshit.
Obviously,
he's lying. That's a lie. And that's so annoying that he's lying about that.
It makes me wonder if there aren't other facts that we don't know about that are also not good for him.
From him or for
not
others?
Not good for him.
Not good for him?
Yeah. For them to lead to these sort of charges.
There's a million stories of him being like an abusive douche. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a voicemail that came out of him screaming at his daughter and calling her a whore and all sorts of stuff and cursing at her?
I don't know.
It may have been him. It may have been one of the other Baldwins, but it may have been him. I mean, the guy's not a good guy. The guy's a really terrible guy. And by the way, his Trump impression is massively overrated. Anthony Atominik, I think his name is. He's got a way better Trump impression. And the fact that Alec Baldwin got all the praise over it kind of annoyed me to no end at the time. I really hate the guy, but I also, in this sense, I sort of feel for him. I guess I'm just torn on the question of involuntary manslaughter when there is not only no intent, but maybe even potentially not that much negligence either. You know what I mean? If there's negligence and something happens, then I get it. Like, should be a crime and should spend time behind bars. If there's no intent and really arguable if there's even negligence there, that's a little different to me. So I'm just torn on, because part of me wants to, evaluate a crime on the basis of the harm done to the victims. Part of me, because it's like you want some sort of semblance of justice for this person's family or whatever. Part of me also, though, wants to evaluate it based on the intent of the person who did whatever they did. Yeah. And so, you and I know this when we're parenting, and if one of the kids does something and it's a total accident, but it ends up hurting the other kid, what do? You don't necessarily punish them. You might say, hey, say sorry or whatever, but it's not like go to your room. It's like the gradations are so important when you talk about criminal justice.
But to use a parenting example, if the kid was being insane and reckless and then accidentally hurts the other one.
But I agree with you.
Then there's a punishment.
But I guess our core disagreement here is that I'm not sure what he did was reckless.
Yeah.
Regardless of what the rules on paper say about the time this fake gun gets to him, when it's supposed to go through 2 other people before it gets to him.
Let me give you just the last few details here. So in April, New Mexico's Occupational Health and Safety Bureau said the film's producers knew that firearm safety procedures were not being followed, and they failed to intervene. They also found that one of the producers, Mr. Halls, did not consult with the armorer before handing the gun to Mr. Baldwin. That goes to your point of, like, the one who yelled out cold gun without checking, and you didn't coordinate. that seems like a massive issue. Workplace Safety Agency imposes civil penalty of nearly $137,000 maximum fine allowed under state law because of the negligent handling. In October, Mr. Baldwin and the Rust production team reached a settlement with the woman who was killed with her family in a wrongful death lawsuit. We don't know what the terms of that settlement were. Alec Baldwin has filed a lawsuit against several Rust crew members, including the armorer and that producer said Cold Gun. That lawsuit says the crew members were negligent in their duties to protect the cast and the crew, including giving Mr. Baldwin a loaded gun. And in response, the armorer said Mr. Baldwin is the only one responsible for this tragedy.
No.
Yeah, that seems ridiculous. When it's literally your job to make sure this is all good to go.
Absolutely. That's obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I actually support him suing them. But, okay, first of all, how much time is he actually facing? Like, what's he actually looking at?
The max is 18 months.
The max is 18 months.
Yeah.
See, now after all this whole conversation, now I feel like I can see that,
maximum, it's a fourth-degree felony, carries a maximum sentence of 18 months in prison, which, I mean, I think, who knows?
You think it's fair?
Do I think that's fair? I mean, I'm kind of like you. I'm torn because I feel like I don't know all the facts. I don't know how much these protocols are really followed. I don't know how much of the burden of responsibility is really on the actor typically in these situations. So I do feel like it's a tough one to say.
Yeah, and it's, again, if intent is king, and it oftentimes is, then it's just hard to look at a situation like that and be like...
Yeah, but I mean, that's the whole purpose of involuntary manslaughter, though, is to say there's no intent.
I understand that, but
again... we didn't mean to hurt anybody, but we did something wrong, and so somebody got hurt. There's got to be some sort of consequence for that.
You're driving down the street, going a reasonable speed.
Yeah.
20-year-old kid who's drunk sprints out to the middle of the street. You run over him. He dies. What should happen?
I mean, I don't think that should be a charge.
But this is what I'm trying to say is like, I don't think he acted reckless. I don't think he acted necessarily negligent. I think that whatever's on paper is kind of bullshit, and the people whose job it is to actually check that thing is their goddamn job to check that thing.
I think a more accurate analogy would be, okay,
him being drunk.
I'm driving down the street.
Yeah, you're driving drunk.
I'm driving drunk even. There's a stop sign that everybody rolls through all the time.
Yeah, I don't think it's that hard and fast of a, no, I don't agree with that. I just think that's a little too... Like, you're looking at something that it says on paper, but like, to me, it's like, when I used to work at the car dealership and there'd be some rule that is like, nobody even knows about the rule, never mind follow it.
Listen, again, I'm not like well-versed in the activities on Hollywood sets, but I do know that after this happened, there were a bunch of actors who came out and were decrying the protocols that were followed, that were saying, as an actor, personally, myself, you would always check. And Alec Baldwin is not new to this game. I mean, this isn't his first time being on a film set. It's not even his first time, handling guns on a film set. So I think there's a real argument that, you were negligent in not following the protocol. You didn't check. It was your job to check. And as a result, someone died.
But as somebody who has shot guns throughout my life, my dad taught me when I was a kid, right? I know you're always supposed to check, see if the gun is loaded the second you get it. But you don't even know if this is a real gun. My default assumption would be this isn't even a real gun. It might be a fake one.
But see, that's actually a really good point, because I mean, I grew up around guns too. My dad is a big gun enthusiast, and that's the first lesson you learn.
Of course,
even if the person tells
and you never pointed at anybody.
Never pointed at anybody.
It's always pointed away, even
let alone
even
pull
if it
the
is
fucking
unloaded.
Trigger.
Yeah, but again,
when you think about it,
thinking this might be a fake gun, and it already went through two people.
Yeah, but when you think of it from that perspective, that's not even like Hollywood set procedure. That's just like basic firearm safety that every single person who's ever dealt with a gun is like drilled into them from the beginning.
He might think it's not even a firearm, though. That's the thing. Like that matters, doesn't it? Doesn't that matter? There's a difference between a freaking squirt gun and an actual gun.
Yeah, but
I'm not going to check the squirt gun to see what he pointed down.
Clearly it was a real gun. So it clearly felt like a real gun.
That's a glib point. We already know.
It's not a glib point.
It is a glib point, because you don't know in the moment. You got to go into his...
It's clearly not a water gun.
You have to, if you're being fair,
not a squirt gun.
Have to try to put yourself in his position.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, which is why I think maybe involuntary manslaughter is appropriate, but higher charges not.
What I will say is this. Look, ultimately... I'm going to be torn on this. I know I'm making the argument. It sounds like I'm pro him getting off. I'm not necessarily, like if they say, okay, you end up getting 6 months in jail or whatever, I'll be, all right. I mean, I see what, I get it, right?
Yeah.
But it is just a tough one for me. But what I will say is this, for sure, I believe this, that company, because of the multiple layers of negligence and what ended up happening here, they should have to pay the family millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars, because that to me seems like a more closer to a semblance of justice. So if you tell me, look, he goes to prison, but they don't get any money from the company, or he doesn't go to prison, but they get a lot of money from the company, I'm going they get a lot of money from the company.
I agree with that. I mean, there was some sort of a settlement that was already reached with the production company and the
Do we
family.
know the number?
We don't know the number.
Okay.
Right. But yeah, terms of the settlement were not disclosed, but they are getting some money. And I also agree with your point. The dude who handed the gun and said cold gun without checking, the assistant director, who is pleading guilty to a lesser charge to just negligent use of deadly weapon, that seems like he's kind of getting off easy.
He's getting off easy, yeah. In the hierarchy of who's guilty here, I go armorer first, that guy second, Alec Baldwin third. I can conceive of a world where they all get some punishment and I can live with it, but I would much rather have, most importantly, that family get paid, son, because they deserve it.
Agreed.
So anyway.
Agree with that.
All right, guys, there you have it. Long intro, but it was worth it. It was fun. I enjoyed that.
Interesting one to dig into.
Let's dive into our conversation here with Loanerbox.
Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.